السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أسعد الله أوقاتكم بكل خير، وأهلا وسهلا فيكم مستمعينا ومشاهدينا عبر إذاعة UFM والبث المباشر في حساب الاتحاد السعودي للأمن السبراني والبرمجة والدرونز على حسابنا في تويتر. رمضان مبارك علينا وعليكم، وكل عام وأنتم بخير. مرحبا بكم من جديد في الموسم الرابع من سايبر نايت، وهو سلسلة من الجلسات الحوارية التي يقيمها الاتحاد السعودي للأمن السبراني والبرمجة والدرونز في شهر رمضان المبارك. جيناكم بموسم مختلف يحتوي على مواضيع متنوعة وضيوف مميزين محليين وعالميين في مجال الأمن السبراني. هذه السنة راح يكون عندنا مسابقة تتكون من عدة أسئلة، والأجوبة راح تكون متوفرة من خلال حلقات سايبر نايت. جهزوا ورقة وقلم وركزوا معنا على أهم النقاط في جميع الحلقات للحصول على جوائز تصل قيمتها إلى 30,000 ريال سعودي. Hi David, how are you?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We are glad to have you today, David. ستكون الجلسة باللغة الإنجليزية، وسنتحدث بشكل عام عن بدايات ديفيد ومسيرته الحافلة في مجال الأمن السبراني رغم صغر سنه، وسنتطرق لأبرز إنجازاته من بداياته في تعلم البرمجة بعمر 10 واكتشافه أول ثغرة بعمر 13، وثم اختراقه لسيارات تيسلا. ونتحدث أيضاً عن أهم التحديات التي تواجه المختصين في هذا المجال، وننتهي بإذن الله بنصائح موجهة للمهتمين في مجال الأمن السبراني. Mr. David, thank you so much for joining us today, and we are glad to have you on Cyber Nights. Tell me a little more about yourself, David.
Definitely. So it's quite a long story, and we have to go back nearly a decade into the past to see where I'm coming from, who I am. Obviously, I'm still young, but my journey started 10 years ago when I was 10 years myself. So I was 10 years old, and for my 10th birthday, I got my first laptop. And I'm a very curious person, and I always have been a very curious person. So it was really interesting to be now connected to the internet, to be able to run all of those applications. And it was really interesting to see everyone else around me using all of those technologies. Everyone was doing Google searches all day. And then eventually I asked myself, out of curiosity, how does it work, right? I said to myself, it's not magic, it's only technology. So it must work somehow. And then I figured out that I'm growing up in the best time I could ever grow up in, because I can just leverage that technology to learn about how it works, right? I can just go ahead and leverage Google to learn about how those different technologies work. And then I figured out that everything is code, right? All of those applications, all of those services, everything is code. So I was like, well, if I really want to fully understand how those things work, I have to start coding myself. So my coding journey started when I was 10 years old, and it was really cool to be able to work on those things, right? And when I was 11, I coded like my own apps, and I was able to show like my family and friends, like, hey, look at this, that is an app I just made this. So this was really interesting to learn all the fundamentals of how all of those things work, whether it's a web server, an application, an operating system, and just breaking into the field in general. And cybersecurity came also in very early. It was 2-3 years down the line after I started coding. I was 13 at this point, and I found my first vulnerability by accident, actually. So by accident, I found my first vulnerability, and this was a pivotal point in my journey to where I am now. Because for one, it was now really cool to learn about hacking and cybersecurity and all of those things. On the other side, you could already see that cybersecurity is going to be one of the most pressing challenges going forward when we digitalize our entire lives, right? Starting with smart homes, going to autonomous cars, but even large parts of critical infrastructure is digital now, right? So the topic really grabbed me, and it became my passion. So I was getting fully into the topic of cybersecurity, and I spent all my time on it. Even though school was in the next day, I didn't care. I stayed up on like 4 a.m. in the morning, coding and hacking in front of my screen. So even my cybersecurity career started very early. And it was really interesting to see and to be able to understand all of the things that are going on, because the topic is something that will only get bigger. The more we digitalize, the more cybersecurity is required, right?
So David, to get this right, you started hacking when you were 13?
Yes, that is correct. And it was really interesting as a journey to start with that early.
So can you tell us more about the first vulnerability you found?
Yes, definitely. And it was also an interesting time back then. because I found an SQL injection vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a vulnerability that has been around since quite some time now. It affects web applications, and it allows an unauthorized attacker to modify the database. You could even go ahead and delete the entire database or change entries in the database. And it was really interesting because for me, I was sitting there and I was like, no one external should be able to like modify the database of this application. No one unauthorized should be able to do this. And that really sparked my interest and curiosity. Like, why does this happen? Why is this there? And how can we prevent things like that?
I like how that the curiosity leads you to find and search more. So you started coding when you were 10, and then you found your first vulnerability when you were 13. When did you decide to focus on your career on becoming a cybersecurity researcher or expert?
So this also started very early. And for me, it wasn't really a career then. I didn't even think about a career or job opportunities. For me, it was just my passion, and it was a lot of fun, and it satisfied my curiosity, learning more about the topic and going into this. So after I went into the cybersecurity field and spent a lot of time on it, 2-3 years down the line from there, when I was 15, so I'm from Germany. So I was in school in Germany in 10th grade. And eventually I asked myself, why should I sit here and learn Latin if I could be out there doing cybersecurity and helping organizations, right? And naturally the question came up, what is more important within the next decade, right? Is it going to be Latin or is it going to be cybersecurity? And for me, it was very clear. Cybersecurity is going to be the important topic within the next decade. So I decided for myself, I have to quit school. And the German government was like, well, David, you don't. Because in Germany, you have to go to school until you are 18. That's so long. So I was thinking about this. And then I was like, well, you know, if I have a bug in my code, if I have an issue in my code, I also don't sit back, relax and say, that's the way it is. You know, there's this bug, you can't do anything. No, you get into it and you fix it. No matter how many hours or Red Bulls it takes to fix that bug in your code, you will fix it, right? So I was just trying to apply the same principle there with getting out of school, until eventually I found someone at the German Chamber of Commerce who kind of understood what I was saying. So he was driving to where I lived, and I was literally living in the middle of nowhere. I had 200 people in my town. It was a really boring German town, and it took the person from the Chamber of Commerce 2.5 hours to drive out there. So he drove out there and he spoke with me and he took a look at what I'm doing, what my projects are, what I'm up to. And then he was like, well, David, we can give you a special permission.
He believes in you.
Yeah, so that was really wonderful to see that he really understood what was happening. And then he was like, yeah, David, we can give you a special permission. You only have to go to school 1 or 2 days a week, and we make the legal stamp on it. So you're good. And you have a lot more time to focus on your topic. So suddenly school was a lot less, and I was able to really focus with my main time on cybersecurity, on getting better, on helping organizations. And eventually, when I was 17, I asked myself, where can I have the most impact now, right? I could join one company and work on one project, but that would be limited, right? So I was trying to take a look at opportunities. Where can I have the most impact to work on multiple different fronts? Because the cybersecurity topic, and especially the issues that we currently have in cybersecurity, are huge and on multiple fronts. So I want to work on different angles. So I started my own company. Unofficially when I was 17, officially as soon as I turned 18, on my 18th birthday, I went to the notary to get it officially. So yeah, that's when I really went into the industry and into the field and was able to create that impact.
So could you tell us a little bit more about the different roles that you play in cybersecurity today, whether it was with your own companies or with the other government agencies?
Yes. So what I'm doing now, after the Tesla story that we will also get to in a minute, it's really a few different things that I'm working on right now. So one of the things that I'm doing is just raising awareness for the topic. I'm at a lot of conferences, having a lot of keynotes to really bring awareness to the huge and massive topics we are facing in cybersecurity right now. On the other side, I'm working with a lot of CISOs, whether within government or in private enterprises, to make sure that they get the insight and the perspective from a hacker and apply those learnings and insights to their security programs, what they can do to go ahead and secure their infrastructures. Right now, I'm also working on a new project, which is, hopefully I can speak about this more in the next few weeks, because we need to get a lot more talent and a lot more people into the cybersecurity industry to start working on those issues. And I'm still doing also security research in my free time.
Interesting. So David, I did a bit of search about hacking Tesla story and found out that you could start the car without the keys. Also, you can figure out the car's location and whether the driver was inside the car or not. Tell us about the story. How did you realize that you could hack a Tesla?
So that's quite a long story, and it started with the same thing that got me into technology and programming at the beginning. It was curiosity again, right? So coming from the curious nature, I want to understand how things work. And I feel like if you want to hack something, that's really where you have to start. You have to start learning how things work and understand how they work before you are able to find any vulnerabilities or hack into anything. So taking a look at cars, it was quite interesting because if we go back 80 years, there was no technology in a car whatsoever. You couldn't hack it, right? And then we had our traditional cars that had some interfaces, Wi-Fi, Canvas, GSM, Bluetooth. And traditionally attacks on cars, you were in proximity of the car and you attacked one of the car's interfaces. So then I was thinking, well, modern cars and cars that we are building now, they are fully connected. They are connected to traffic lights, to other cars, maybe even to smart roads. And all of those cars have communication back to the manufacturer, constant data communication. So I was thinking, what if someone would be able to go the other route when attacking a car through the manufacturer, because then someone would be able to control multiple cars remotely around the world rather than just one car that he's close by. So I just wanted to understand how the communication works between the car and the manufacturer and how all of this is set up, right? And I'm a Tesla fan. As soon as I heard Tesla exists, I've been a fan because I'm not a car guy, but I'm a computer guy, and a Tesla is basically a computer on wheels. So
you were having Tesla.
I just want to take a look at. No, I don't. I still don't have a Tesla. I wish. So I just want to understand how this works, and I figured out doing that research that every Tesla communicates with something called the mothership. It's Tesla's main backend server on the other side, controlling all of those things. And I was just poking around the backend infrastructure a bit to see what is set up and what is there. And then I found a piece of third-party code directly connected to the mothership that was displaying some charging statistics. So I was like, well, this is interesting. So somehow this application must communicate with the cars to get the data, like the charging statistics. So how does it work? I asked myself. And then luckily, a few pieces of that third-party application were open source, some packages, some libraries, and some of the code were open source. So I was able to just spend some time reading through the source code of that application to understand how it works. I mean, what else do you do if you have a free Friday afternoon, right? Other than reading through source code, figure out how things work. So that's what I did. I started reading through the source code and I discovered a few interesting things. So the first one was that there are some tokens involved to communicate with the mothership and with the cars, and they seem to be stored in the application, which was a really interesting revelation because they haven't been encrypted so far. So now we have those tokens for communication that haven't been encrypted. And I figured out that the application stores them in something called repo. So I thought repo is going to be a secure storage mechanism. It's going to take care of encryption. It's going to be a vault. It's going to be really secure, right? So I continued reading through the code to figure out what repo is. Turns out it's just the normal PostgreSQL database that also stores all the other data. And then I was like, this is interesting because now I have unencrypted tokens which allow authentication to the mothership and pulling data in the database unencrypted. And then I was thinking, well, I can also read some data from the database, like the charging statistics, using the public dashboard. And then this little what if came up in my head, and I just couldn't get rid of it. That what if I would be able to craft a request to the API of that application being like, hey, I'm a public dashboard, but please also, give me the charging statistics, but please also hop a few tables in the database and give me those tokens as well. So I didn't think this would work. I didn't think there was a vulnerability or that anything would work, but I couldn't get rid of the what if, right? I was curious. So I was crafting a few requests and sending them out. And eventually I got back those tokens. And I was like, this is interesting, because those tokens are kind of digital car keys. And I think I can use those tokens to authenticate at the mothership, or maybe even at the cars, like I'm the owner, or I'm Tesla. So at first I was trying to pull data to see if this actually affects anything, or if I'm able to read something. So I was actually pulling some driving data and put the cars on a map. And this was really interesting. It's quite an interesting slide I have in my keynotes all the time, where you could literally see like cars in Europe and their driving history, and in the US and in different countries. And then I was like, well, this seems to be an issue that affects a lot of cars around the world. So that is a serious issue. And then you mentioned things like honking the horn or unlocking the doors. That was also something where I was thinking, I think I can do this, but I wasn't sure, right? And then I just thought, I have to try this. I have to see if it's possible. But if I just do it with a random car, that's unethical, right? Because you have to be really careful when doing security research to stay in the legal round. So I was thinking, I have to find someone that has a Tesla and that is affected by this. So what I did was pulling the names of the cars and just Googling them, because some Tesla owners gave their cars very unique names. So a few Tesla owners also tweeted about their cars with their very unique names. So I texted a few people on Twitter and I was like, hey, do you still have your Tesla? I think there might be something we have to discuss, and shared some details with them. And a few people came back to me. Yes. I tried to reach out.
Owners. That's interesting.
Yes, to actually, to figure out if actually if I can do something and how far, because reading data is one thing, actually being able to send commands to the car is another thing, right? That's even more critical. So I started speaking with this one person and in California, and there's quite an interesting exchange on Twitter where we started talking, because he was like, well, I have a Tesla with that name, and he was like, what is the VIN number? So he could like verify it's actually his car. So I sent him his VIN number, and he was like, well, yeah, that's my car. and he said, I assume you don't have access now. And I was like, well, if you could just give me permission to like try something like honk the horn or unlock the doors, that would be great. And he was like, yeah, do whatever. And yeah, exactly. And I don't think he actually believed me, but he gave me the permission to do it. So I just sent some requests and I asked him if he can confirm this worked. And he was like, yeah, that worked. The car just honked, or the doors got unlocked. And I'm like, interesting. Because now we have a really big issue, since I'm able to send commands to the cars, and you could do everything. And the most interesting things are you can figure out where the car is. You can turn off the security mode. Yeah, definitely. But figuring out where the car is, turning off the security mode, unlocking the doors, and I could start keyless driving. So technically, like in a movie, I would be able to go up to the affected cars, just unlock the doors, get in, start keyless driving, and take the car for a road trip. You can do anything. And as you mentioned, you could also do exactly a range of other things, AC, YouTube videos, music, and we demonstrated this also live at Black Hat last year in Riyadh. We had a Tesla there. The license plate for the car we had at Black Hat was actually Hacker. That was a very interesting experience.
That's really interesting. So David, how did you communicate your findings to Tesla and the other stakeholders, and what was their response?
So there was also an interesting approach, because we had multiple stakeholders involved, right? So I just put together a report with all the details, all the technical details, what I found, what I did, what I recommend to fix it, and I sent it to everyone that was involved. And the first thing I got from Tesla, I reported via email. So they have a security email, and they also have, luckily, a security team and a vulnerability disclosure policy and everything. So the first email I got back was like, yeah, thanks, we are looking into this. And a few hours later, I got another email that was like, oh yeah, we are now starting to take care of this, and we are working on this. So they reacted very quickly. And also very competent, and started taking care of the issue. So I'm very glad that everyone that was involved was able to get on the issue very quickly.
Which means that they are mature enough to reply and interact with the report that you sent to them. That's really interesting.
Definitely.
Have you talked to Elon Musk?
Luckily, no, I haven't talked with Elon Musk. Unfortunately not. But they have a very good security team, and they have structures in place to support security researchers and collaborate with them if issues like that come up.
That's interesting. So David, in your opinion, what are some of the most pressing security challenges facing the electric cars industry today? And what steps can be taken to address them?
So it's a good question that you are asking, because I feel like it feeds into the bigger picture as well. We see a few trends right now that are not only affecting autonomous or electric cars, but that are also affecting other industries as well. And there are two interesting findings that I had for me personally. One is that we are connecting a lot of things that haven't previously been connected to the internet now to the internet, and we do this in a massive extent. It's not a trial run, we do this in production to a lot of things, not only cars. And the other thing that I saw was that innovation is happening so fast now. We have all of those big enterprises driving innovation, we have a lot of startups driving innovation, and cybersecurity is a lot of times left aside or left behind. So sometimes we really need to pause, take that step back, and take a look at the cybersecurity aspect of things, right? And we see this not only in the EV industry, we see this also when it comes to smart cities, when it comes to even critical infrastructure, right? We are connecting a lot of critical infrastructure now to the internet. And we also see this in the enterprise context. After the discovery, I was in a lot of different places around the world, and I spent an extended period of time in the Silicon Valley working with a lot of CISOs from large companies, even Fortune 500 companies. Take a look at their security initiatives. And one of the things that a lot of people brought up was the cloud. Because previously we had everything running on-prem, and I always pictured it as a circle. So we had that circle where we put all of our infrastructure inside, and then we could secure the perimeter around it. But what we are doing now with the migration to the cloud is we are splitting up that circle, and suddenly a lot more systems are directly connected to the internet, right? So those are the two interesting things that are happening. We are now connecting a lot of things to other interfaces, and we are doing this so fast that cybersecurity really can't keep up. So we really have, as entire cybersecurity industry and also the affected other industries, really make sure that we put in that conscious effort and sometimes take that step to make a pause and bring in the cybersecurity topic. It's going to be really important, especially since the things and systems we are talking about are affecting human lives directly.
That's right. So David, do you have recommendations for improving the security of Tesla or the wider cars industry as a whole?
So for me, a lot of things comes also down to the talent. We need to have a lot more talent working on those issues, right? And if we take a look at how people can start learning on those topics, it's not quite easy in the automotive industry, for example, because how many security researchers can buy a $70,000 car and risk breaking it while doing their research, right? I mean, if you want to learn how to hack web applications, you just go on GitHub, you download something and you start. But if we take a look at other industries, whether that's automotive or even aviation, it's not easy to get access to those systems, right? So we need to do a lot to bring down that entry-level barrier to allow talent learning on those systems, working on those systems, and building their skills. So that is something that I would definitely urge the entire industry to do. So we have that capability, we have those resources to work on the numerous different issues that we are facing.
I agree with you. So David, what is the latest trends in cybersecurity and where it's headed in the next 2 years, in your opinion?
So there's definitely a number of things and a number of topics that are coming up for different industries. But what was interesting for me when I was speaking with the CISOs in the Silicon Valley, or even with different stakeholders at the World Government Summit in Dubai, and also in Riyadh at Black Hat, there were three common issues that a lot of people had together. So number one, we already mentioned, this is the cloud migration. That is a massive effort that is going on for enterprises to migrate a lot of their infrastructure to the cloud, which is opening up a lot of the attack surface that is coming in. We can't use the same security principles we used on-prem now in the cloud. It's just a different type of infrastructure, right? So cloud was one of the issues. The other issue that a lot of people mentioned was the SDLC, the software development lifecycle, because we also see a massive shift in how we develop software, how quickly we deploy updates, how much software is being developed. So if we take a look at a large enterprise, they have thousands of developers, they have hundreds of systems within their development lifecycle they need to protect. And if we take a look at some of the recent attacks in that space, we see how critical it is. If we think of SolarWinds, the threat actor only needed to attack that one build server within the software development lifecycle for them to inject malicious code into the application, which then it was flowing downstream. It was flowing into the entire business. It was flowing to customers, right? So from a hacker's perspective, I only need to compromise one system in a software development lifecycle, and then I'm able to get my malicious code to a lot of companies, right? Which makes it really appealing for threat actors. And we see a number of attacks happening in that vector. And then the last thing that a lot of people spoke about and where security initiatives started driving towards was APIs. Because everything is APIs nowadays. Whether you build a car, a web application, whatever you build, it's going to have APIs, right? So we really have to make sure that those API layers are secure. Because again, in large enterprises, you're going to have thousands of APIs, and you don't know anything about those, right? So we also need to start protecting that layer, whether it's internally in companies or what we expose to the internet. We create a single centralized entry point for our users, but also our threat actors and our attackers, right? So APIs become really interesting from the threat actor's perspective. And again, we see attacks on this happening all the time. So we definitely will see a lot of security initiatives that are driving towards those three topics that we just mentioned to make sure we are getting a hold of the issues. On the other side, we will see the cyber-physical space as a whole grow tremendously. Mm-hmm. If we are going to build smart cities, if we are going to connect more critical infrastructure to the internet, we are talking hospitals getting digitalized. So a lot of physical human life endangering systems are now connected to the internet. And we really have to ramp up our efforts on that front, because the attacks that are happening right now are already critical enough. And most of the discoveries are luckily by ethical security researchers. If we think back to Chris Roberts, when he was sitting on this 12-hour plane flight and he got bored, and he was also curious, so he looked around and he was able to take control over parts of the plane, right? So those are the attacks that we are talking in the cyber-physical space, and we have to make sure it's secure. Because from a threat actor's perspective, and we really have to take a look at what threat actors are focusing on so we can be there before they get there. And a threat actor can build a lot more pressure by attacking physical things, right? If you encrypt a company's data, if they are set up well enough, they can just restore from backups, right? But if we take a look at airplanes, I mean, think about a threat actor being able to tell an airline, either you pay us or we are going to crash those planes. And right now, luckily, this is not happening because mostly security researchers are driving the research in that space. But I fear that as soon as threat actors see the value in attack from those systems, the world is going to look a bit different. So we need to shift towards cyber-physical as well and make sure we really cover those topics very early on, and especially when we are building those things. Smart cities are now getting built, so we have to make sure cybersecurity is not an afterthought, but we implement it from the very beginning, and we implement it in very strong ways.
That's right, I agree with you. So David, you just mentioned that about your participation in Black Hat MIA that was held on Riyadh. Can you tell us more about your experience?
So Black Hat was an absolutely exciting event. It was really incredible. So what Black Hat Middle East in Riyadh did was it combined the DEF CON and the Black Hat experience into one event, which was really, really unique, really unique. And when I walked there, I took a look to the left side and I saw the DEF CON car hacking village, and I saw a smart city hacking space, and I saw the massive CTF. The CTF was really impressive. What was built there was incredible. And then on the other side, you had, of course, the exhibition, but also the executive stage and a number of CISOs from different entities. I met, for example, the CISO for the World Health Organization at the executive side of things to speak about those topics. So you really managed to bring the hacker community as well as the senior stakeholders from the CISO side together. And there was a lot of value for everyone, right? Because we talked about the latest trends, we talked about attacks happening, we talked about how to defend different systems and how to drive security initiatives on the one side. On the other side, we had the CTF, where we were able to nurture a lot of talent, to get a lot of people interested and for them to showcase their skills. And also we had a focus on cyber physical with the DEF CON car hacking village and with other things that were set up. I think the activity zone was even sponsored by NEOM. So you can see that also those organizations are driving the security in that space. So overall, amazing event. And I was really happy to be part of it and being able to showcase the Tesla story on site and hopefully get a lot of young minds inspired as well to start their journey in cybersecurity.
We are glad that you had a great experience. So David, can you tell us about the physical attacks? If you have like some real life scenarios or even the ways to prevent these kind of attacks?
Definitely, because if we take a look at a cyber physical space, it's really about human lives now. Traditionally, when we talked cybersecurity, it was about apps and websites and corporate infrastructure. And now we have to talk about securing critical infrastructure that has impact on human lives, right? Mm-hmm. So we see a few stories that are happening which are really, really scary in some sense and just show the urgency of what we have to do on the cybersecurity side. We already talked about the Chris Roberts story, which is still incredible. Just quickly also go into that on that a bit more. So Chris Roberts was sitting on this plane. It was a 12-hour flight. So he got bored and he was just taking a look around what he can do, what is there. So he found this box under his seat that he plugged into, and 30 minutes later, he controlled parts of the plane, which obviously is very critical, right? Okay. And if we take a look at something else that has impact on human lives, it's water infrastructure, right? And just last year, a few months ago, there is a water treatment facility in the UK, which on a weekend, a threat actor hacked into it. Just on a weekend, they hacked into it and they took control over every single system within that infrastructure to a point where they would have been able to poison the water for 1.6 million people. So those are the scales of attacks that we are talking now. And that's why we need a lot more urgency on the cybersecurity side, which is also required from a government level, right? From a policy level, from a regulation level. And on that side, we have to make sure that we have the needed expertise and the right knowledge to build policies that are actually effective and not only checklists. And we can continue this in cyber physical, take a look at some other critical areas. Ukraine's power grid, already a few years ago, not just recently, a few years ago, Ukraine's power grid got attacked and parts of it were taken down. So for a long time, hundreds of thousands of people didn't have a functioning power grid. And there's also quite an interesting story behind this, because the only reason they got it online again after a few hours was because there was one physical switch left. That physical switch was scheduled to be replaced by a digital one a few weeks later. And just because the one physical switch was still there, they were able to turn it on again, right? But also if we take a look at other attacks on enterprises which have impact on physical things, right? 2017, Maersk got hacked, which is the largest shipping and logistics company in the world. And they got struck. They lost everything. They lost 40,000 PCs. They lost 2,000 servers. They lost all their backups. They lost everything. And there's quite an interesting quote that I like to bring up from someone who worked on the incident response side in that case. Because he was saying, imagine a port where a ship with 10 to 20,000 containers comes in every 15 minutes, and you have no idea where those containers have to go. So now you get 20,000 containers every 15 minutes to the port, and you have no idea where those containers have to go. Suddenly that also ensues chaos on the logistics and on the port side, right? So we see a number of those attacks happening, and hospitals is another one of those topics. Hospitals, we talk about attacks in hospitals, and a lot of people think those attacks are far out, right? Mm-hmm. But a few years ago, there was a case in Germany where a hospital got attacked and successfully hacked, and most of their systems were completely down, which actually unfortunately affected human lives directly. There was a patient on the way to the emergency room of that hospital, and that patient had to get redirected to another hospital because the hospital that got hacked, they just couldn't provide the services needed. And on the way of transferring the patient to another hospital, he died on the way. So there was actually a death recorded because of a cyber attack on that hospital. So when talking about cyber physical, we talk those attack scenarios and we talk those impacts, which really, in my opinion, shows the urgency and the pressure we have to put in when it comes to cybersecurity and securing those things, which is going to be really, really critical.
So now let's move on and talk about the advices that you may give for the individuals who are interested to enter the field of cybersecurity.
Definitely. So it comes back to what I said earlier in the conversation as well, is we first have to understand the basics, right? So you can't just go ahead and start hacking tomorrow. You first have to understand how the different systems that you want to attack works, right? If you want to take a look at the security or hack a web application, then you need to understand how a web application works. So I'm really recommending for everyone who wants to get into the space to start with understanding how things work. You have to build it, you have to break it. Just setting up a virtual machine and playing around with a Linux and setting up a web server. Those are definitely things that I would recommend. And then when moving into cybersecurity, it's a lot easier, because if you know how those systems work, it's a lot easier to understand how to attack them and what the attack surface might be. And then also understanding how to secure them, right? Because now you know where the issues in those systems might be. So that's what I would recommend. And then I always say to people that you can do it. A lot of people have the opinion that cybersecurity is this huge cloud that is far away, that is very hard to enter. But it's really, we have to demystify it, and we have to give pathways to people. And I'm really glad to see that we are opening up a lot more of those things. There are now great platforms like Hack the Box, for example, where you have the ability to train your skills, to test your skills in a safe environment, where you can just go ahead and hack a simulated system and learn about how that works. What is going to be really important for everyone is to stay on the legal and the ethical side of things, because when you start learning cybersecurity and hacking, you're gonna be able to do a lot of things, and it's really important to stay on the ethical track. And that's where a lot of interesting things come in, like bug bounty challenges or CTFs, and we mentioned that in terms of Black Hat, where young people can then go ahead and build their skills even further, and also showcase the skills they have. So I can just recommend for everyone, if we have young listeners here that consider going into cybersecurity, to do it. It's an exciting field. It's just going to continue to grow, and we need a lot more people, whether that is on the offensive side or also on the defensive side. A lot of people ask me, how do we make the defensive side of cybersecurity cool to the audience? And I'm always saying, why make it cool? It is cool. We just need to get it out there, right? Yeah. Defending against all of the attacks that we are talking about is incredibly important, especially if we think about defending hospitals, for example, against cyber attacks. So also the defensive side is something really interesting for people to take a look at and go into. And I also think the Saudi Federation has different programs and contact points for young people in Saudi to go to and start their journey. So to conclude that question, I can just recommend everyone to get into cybersecurity, take a look at the field, and you can do it. It's not that complicated, mysterious thing. We are now building programs. We are building those roadmaps for people to get into cybersecurity.
That's right. Mr. David Kolombo, thank you so much for joining us today, and we are glad to have you in Cyber Nights. ومثل ما قال الأستاذ ديفيد، الفضول هو الدافع الأساسي لتعلم أي معرفة جديدة، وخاصة في مجال الأمن السبراني. شكراً جزيلاً لكم متابعينا عبر إذاعة UFM والبث المباشر على حساب الاتحاد السعودي للأمن السبراني والبرمجة والدرونز على حضور ومتابعة هذه الحلقة. لا تنسون تشاركونا أهم نقاط هذه الحلقة اليوم على هاشتاغ سايبر نايت 4. كانت معكم نجلاء الخاطر.